shelves warp, crack and splinter under the weight of growing golden nests. Distorted, shattered pottery lines the edges of the room. Gold leaks from the walls and floors like blood oozing from a festering wound. All the while the sounds of a discordant violin play, and the faint whisper, "Am I not beautiful?" can be heard. This is Filthy Lucre, an art installation by contemporary artist Darren Waterson, and it's inspired by the Peacock Room. Gilded shelves stand tall, making the room feel like being in a Japanese palace. The walls are lined with sparkling fine china ceramics. Gold is delicately applied to every inch of space. Outside, the sounds of busy London streets can be heard. This is the Peacock Room. So how did we get from this to this? From a gilded golden finery to a gilded golden massacre? Well, to look at how Filthy Lucre became what it is, we have to look at the creation of the Peacock Room, to a story of art and of money. Part 2. Art and Money. The story of the room. The Peacock Room is the story of three men and a select period in history. The first of the men is Richard Leyland. Leyland was a self-made man. He owned his own shipping company by the age of 30 after starting out as an office boy. The second man is James Abbott McNeill Whistler, an American-born artist living in London and good personal friend of Leyland. Whistler was very much at the forefront of the new moving trends in art, gaining a reputation for being brilliant and also hard to work with. That last bit is going to be important for later. Finally, we have the architect, Thomas Jeckyll, very much a pioneer of the architectural aesthetic movement. He helped popularise some of the architectural flourishes that you find in many English households made around the time period of the late 1800s. Gilded flourishes and mundane objects like door handles and fireplaces are given the greatest of significance and made into art objects all their own. 49 Prince Gate, a home nicknamed the Mansion for its lavishness, was the primary home of Richard Leyland. Leyland was a generous patron of the arts and had collected and commissioned many artworks from various artists. A signature part of his collection was a large amount of blue and white Chinese ceramic pottery. The room being made to house Leyland's ceramics is not just an incidental detail. At the time, collecting Chinese pottery was massive. Oscar Wilde, probably best known as the author of The Painting of Dorian Gray, once said, "I do find it harder and harder every day to live up to my blue china." I don't know if that's what he sounded like, but that's what I'm going with. The artist Whistler was actually one of the early adopters of collecting Chinese pots, but after he popularised it, he was quickly priced out of the market by the upper classes and was unable to take part in the trend he helped popularise. Yes, you're absolutely right, that is very funny. The trend was also widespread enough to be parodied in multiple places, mainly the satirical magazine Punch. In this entry to Punch, titled "Acute China Mania," a mother is distraught at a broken porcelain plate as her daughter attempts to console her. The original text reads, "Mama, mama, don't go on like this, pray. What have I got left to live for? Haven't you got me, mama? You, child, you're not unique. There are 6 of you. A complete set." Absolutely savage. At the time, collecting and curating art was one of the only ways for class climbers like Leyland to move up in society. With a collection as large as his, along with patronising many current artists, Leyland was aiming to gain social capital with the elites in London society. Leyland commissioned the artist Thomas Jeckyll to create a dining room to host his dinner parties and to display and show off his large collection of blue and white. Very much the car showroom of its day, you could say. The room also had a second function, to display a large painting called The Princess from the Land of Porcelain, painted by Whistler. To decorate the room, Jekyll used expensive leather wallpaper, covered in red flowers. Jekyll's version of the room was intended to look something like this. Scans of the walls still show the embossed design of Jekyll's wallpaper before it was painted over. At this point, the room according to Jekyll's design is effectively finished. Whistler, who was actually doing work in the house for Leyland already, however, is not happy with the state of the room, believing the colour on the flowers to clash with his painting. Jekyll agrees to let Whistler do some minor alterations to the room, including lightening the colour of the flowers on the wallpaper and a few other small touch-ups. If you're paying attention, you've probably figured out where all this is going. Whistler, left alone in the house, completely undoes the creative work of Jekyll, coating the walls in deep blue paint and gilding the shelves in gold. Not content with this, Whistler then starts decorating the room with golden peacock feather motif, adding decoration to almost every inch of the room. The shutters were decorated with full-length peacock murals inspired by Japanese woodblock prints. Whistler became so enamoured with the room that he worked on it almost non-stop between 1876 and 1877. Whistler spoke of this time saying, "Well, you know, I just painted on. I went on without design or sketch. It grew as I painted, and towards the end I reached such a point of perfection, putting in every touch with such freedom, that when I came round to the corner where I started, I had to paint part of it over again, as the difference would have been too marked, and the harmony in blue and gold developing. You know, I forgot everything in my joy of it." So pleased with his work on the room was he, that Whistler actually titled it like he would one of his paintings, calling it Harmony in Blue and Gold, the Peacock Room. Leyland was actually away on business during this time, and so he had no clue what was being done. While painting, Whistler actually invites people into Leyland's home to watch his painting process and to look at the room, going as far as to create flyers. Whistler during this period had no other clients, choosing instead to devote all his attention to the room. All this focus maybe had something to do with the fact that at the time he was facing considerable financial trouble, perhaps using the room as a way to draw more attention to himself and to invite potential clients. When Leyland returns to his London mansion, he saw his new dining room for the first time. Whistler had sent letters to Leyland saying that he was working on the room, but not the extent of the changes he had made. Whistler charges Leyland 2,000 guineas, an old English currency, for the work. Leyland refuses to pay for the work he had neither requested and that undid the work of the previous artist he had paid to work on the room. The two go back and forth bickering on the finances. In the end, Leyland agrees to the payment of £1,000. Now, at the time, pounds was something you would pay for simple goods like meat or lumber, and the work of artisans was supposed to be done in guineas. This was both insulting to Whistler, reducing his work to mere services, but also shortchanging him, as £1 was valued slightly less than 1 guinea. Oh, the drama. There is still an issue regarding the room, that is that the far wall above the mantel is still empty. This is because this was supposed to be the intended location for a second painting. This painting was agreed to be done prior to the room's creation, and to depict Leyland's family. The chance of Leyland and Whistler working together after this incident were slim to say the least, but the space still needed to be filled. Accordingly, Whistler, who still had access to the house, entered the room and painted a mural of two peacocks battling one another. The two peacocks represent the argument that occurred between artist and patron regarding the room. The peacock on the left, standing defensively, wing outstretched, represents Whistler, the poor defenceless artist, only attempting to keep himself afloat. This peacock is denoted as Whistler by the silver plumage atop its head, as Whistler rather famously had a silver lock of hair. This same silver lock he uses to denote himself was often used to represent him in caricatures, such as when he was depicted in Punch after suing a critic for damages in 1978. It is to the left of this peacock that Whistler signs the painting, with a butterfly that had become his signature at the time. The peacock on the right represents Leyland, standing bold and standoffish. The right peacock stands atop a pile of gold and silver coins. The same coins are literally embedded into the chest feathers of the right peacock, and the silver ruffles on the chest is a nod to the ruffled style of shirt that Leyland was known for being fond of. Whistler, after he was done painting this artwork, sent a letter to Leyland, stating the intentions of what the artwork was designed to depict. He also gave it a name, Art and Money, or The Story of the Room. Interestingly, when Leyland furnished the room, he had the head of the dining table positioned facing this mural. This spot at the dining table would have been sat at only by the head of the household. The head of the household in this case being Leyland, meaning that whenever Leyland ate at this dining room, he was facing the artwork designed to mock him. Perhaps he volunteered to face the mocking image as a form of self-protest. Maybe he wished to make a display of how little it affected him. Maybe he never actually read Whistler's letter and just didn't notice. A question for smarter people than I. The relationship between artist and patron was now damaged beyond repair. Whistler actually painted a scathing caricature of Leyland following this. An extremely grown-up and mature thing to do, I'm sure you'll agree. This piece, titled The Gold Scab, Eruption into Filthy Lucre, represents Leyland as a monstrous half-man, half-peacock, playing the piano. Leyland, denoted once again by the ruffled shirt he is wearing, is surrounded by bags of coin, Just like in his representation in the Peacock Room, he has the coins laced into his feathers. The monster sits atop a representation of Whistler's townhouse. This is a property Whistler had significant financial trouble with, and in the end ended up having to sell it along with many of his possessions. Clearly, Whistler blames Leyland for his financial troubles, leading to him having to sell the property. This is why the monster literally sits atop the property in full control of it. The name of this piece is actually a play on words. The gold scab is Leyland, painting over his wounds with gold to hide the man he really is. And Frilthy is combining the words filthy and frilly. Lucre, lastly, is a word meaning money or to gain money. It's where the word lucrative comes from. The architect, Thomas Jeckyll, was reportedly the one most affected by the room. Jekyll was never consulted by Whistler, who completely undid his original design for the room. When Jekyll saw the room for the first time, it broke him. Jekyll was reportedly found later, after seeing the room, unconscious on the floor of his house, covered in gold paint after gilding his own floors. Perhaps it was at the sight of all his work being completely decimated with no regards to his artistic vision. Perhaps it was realising that the room was in fact brilliant, and that in realising his contribution, his most significant work would merely be a footnote in another artist's creation. Jekyll lived out the remaining years of his life in an asylum, dying shortly afterwards. Part 3. Harmony in Blue and Gold. The Peacock Room. After all was said and done, the room was used as a dining room by Leyland to show off his collection of porcelain and for his extravagant dinner parties until Leyland's death in 1892. Not being so big a fan of the room, his wife realised that she was able to sell it. An auction was put up advertising it in newspapers. It was eventually sold to Charles Freer, who had already bought the princess from the land of porcelain and basically got the room to accompany it. Freer owned the room, using it to display his own collection of pottery. The room in its entirety is now in Washington, D.C., where it is on display for the public in the Freer Art Gallery. The legacy of the room is significant. Whistler in his lifetime experimented with the idea of having his paintings in a specific setting. Later on, he had events to display his artwork, where he designed the decor and everyone attending had to follow a strict dress code so that everything synergistically interacted with his artwork. The Peacock Room is almost a pure example of a room decorated for the purpose of highlighting the artwork within it, everything interplaying together. Even the colour scheme was likely designed to interact with the blue and white china that it was going to display on the shelves. In this way, the Peacock Room functions as a sort of early concept for the immersive art installation, where everything is designed to link together and create an experience. The Peacock Room is the only surviving example of Whistler playing with this form. It makes a lot of sense that a contemporary artist would look back at the Peacock Room as inspiration for a new installation, to take the emotions of the room and the story that led to its creation, and put that at the forefront, rather than buried beneath all the gold. Part 4. Disharmony in Blue and Gold. Filthy Lucre. In Filthy Lucre, everything that is beautiful in the Peacock Room is twisted and corrupted into something ugly and dark. The imposing shelves made to highlight Leyland's lavish collection of Chinese ceramics are twisting and warping, as if collapsing under the weight of the ceiling. The room is falling apart under the weight of its own sordid history. The pottery itself is no longer dazzling blue and white, but mass-produced pottery, crudely painted over, or pots made deliberately warped and misshapen. Strewn about the floor and shelves, shattered fragments of pottery, reducing the components to what they really are. The pots being reduced to mass production is actually extremely fitting, as the China mania that crippled the English upper class was made by Chinese potters in a mass production style, and were made specifically to sell to the English. The pottery being shattered in some places, a reminder that Whistler was one of the people priced out of the trend he helped create. The gold that covers the Peacock Room has begun to coagulate into golden stalactites that resemble wasps' nests. The gold also pools on the floor to resemble a puddle of blood, oozing out of the walls, likely a mirroring to the fate of Thomas Jeckyll, found covered in gold after seeing the Peacock Room for the first time. The shutters of the room are left open just a crack, spilling out ominous red light that casts an unwelcoming shadow across the room, and turning the gold from something opulent into something sickly. Whistler's painting, the princess from the land of porcelain, remains mostly faithfully recreated, except for how her face has been obscured by what appears to be black mould. Finally, the centrepiece of the room, the two battling peacocks, have been entirely reimagined. No longer do the peacocks have a sense of regalness about them. Now they are caught in the act of disemboweling one another. Unlike Whistler's version of the mural, the birds now lack the identifying markings that distinguish each other. The silver lock of hair that identifies Whistler and the ruffled section of plumage are now totally absent, leaving you to wonder who's attacking who. The message is clear. Art and money are not so dissimilar. When you stop and take a step back, you can hardly tell the difference. In other words, art and money are twinned. They may play antonyms, but in reality, they feed off each other. In the painting of Dorian Gray, the titular character remains young and attractive because their painting takes all of life's woes for them. Whenever Dorian acts amoral, the painting is the one to be made ugly by it, and so Dorian simply stops looking at the painting, to disregard everything it stands for within him. In the same way, Filthy Lucre reflects all of the anguish that went into the Peacock Room, the feud that developed between the two previous friends, the mass-manufactured pottery the room was designed to display that made it treated like precious objects, Jekyll's eventual mental decline. All of this lives within the room, and now there is something that reflects it. All of the ugliness and vanity the room represents laid bare for all to see. It is somewhat fitting then that Oscar Wilde, who had many public disagreements with Whistler, based the murdered artist in his books off of Whistler himself. The room is truly immersive, designed to simulate as many senses as possible. The red lighting makes the room seem hellish and otherworldly. There is also a soundtrack created for the room specifically. Recorded by the band Betty, it provides the room with an ominous choir. The room whispers about how pretty it is. String instruments play discordant notes as the room talks to you. Even the floor groans underfoot. Your very presence in it feels unwelcome and unwanted. Georgina Adams, editor-at-large for the art newspaper, has described the modern state of art as being a billionaire's boxing match. There are more billionaires and millionaires in the world every year, with all of them wanting high-profile items, either as a status symbol, an investment, or to start their own museums. Let's say money is no object, and you want to own a Picasso, but you're competing with others in the same position. Well, there's only so many Picasso paintings, so that price just goes up to extreme levels of inflation. Picasso is one of the more prolific artists you would want to own a painting of. There's actually a reasonable number of his original artworks in circulation. The most expensive painting ever sold at auction was Da Vinci's Salvator Mundi for $450.3 million US. In 2015, when Filthy Lucre was released, the number of record-breaking prices reached at auctions was the highest it's ever been. In the book written for Filthy Lucre, the artist's statement reads, "We are living in our own frenzied gilded age. The global art market supplies an unprecedented consumption of contemporary art as a consolidation of wealth played out against the radical inequalities of our time." There couldn't have been a better time to explore the Peacock Room again, to peel back the facade that at one point art wasn't about money. Art is always about money. Sometimes a piece of art can represent the world in a greater sense than ever before. In combining the installation art piece, recreating something from one of the original artists who invented the idea, in making something that reflects the emotional turmoil behind a piece of art, revealing the true face of the work, in bringing back a story that may have been forgotten about but is now more poignant than ever before, Filthy Lucre is the painting of Dorian Gray for a new age. Thanks for watching.